piling in from all over the world to have a look at this, and blacks are completely excluded in the sense that they're supposed to have nothing to do with it. They're supposed to have no relationship whatsoever to that early Egyptian. And the Egyptian Minister of Culture, in fact, made a statement saying that he doesn't want to get involved, the Egyptians do not want to get involved in this black thing over here because Ramesses II is beyond black or white. And in fact, he made the statement further that Africans have nothing to do with his Egyptian culture. Now, the point I made was that he is speaking the truth. We have nothing to do with his culture because he's not an African. It is very important to understand that. The Egyptian Minister of Culture today is not an African. It is like if ex-President Reagan got up to speak for the Native American. The Native American is not in Washington. He's very rare there. He is found in Central Mexico, Central America rather. He's found in South America. We have to understand that in relation to modern Egypt. You can go into Cairo and you can sit in a room as you sit here, and there are no native Egyptians. There are Egyptians, but they're modern Egyptians. Do not confuse the modern Egyptian with the native Egyptian who built the pyramids. As you go further down towards the south, even in the north itself of Egypt today, you can find a great number of black African people. But many people that you see in Egypt today are not native to the place. This is true of America. Many Americans are white. The Native American is not white. Many Americans are late Asiatics like the Japanese, the Chinese, etc. The Native American may have had some element of Japanese and Chinese, but the Native American is not Japanese or Chinese. So we have to be extremely careful about that. In fact, not until 1830, as late as 1830, no one seriously in Europe doubted that the early Egyptian was a black African. The Europeans who had seen him, the Europeans who had entered that country, the Greeks, the first great Europeans, the Europeans who had defeated the Egyptians, the Europeans who had entered that civilization, made it quite clear they were dealing with black people. They said it again and again whenever there was necessity to say it. They made it clear in their documents. Herodotus said quite clearly, these are black-skinned people with woolly hair. When, however, in 1974 at the UNESCO conference, Sheikh Anta Diop went to great pains to show that his melanin dosage test had been developed to establish that the melanin content between the derm and the epiderm showed clearly that the mummies examined in the Museum of Man were black-skinned. Abdullah, the Egyptian delegate, jumped up. Nobody else got so upset except the Egyptian who is not native. Jumped up and said, even if they're black-skinned, they're white. It was very important to him to say that. Now, I'm not attacking the Arab because the Arab, in fact, joining with the black African, the Arabian type, that is, because 100 million blacks speak Arabic. Okay, don't get confused with people speaking Arabic and Arabs, because many people who are not Arabs speak Arabic, and the Arab script, for example, was created by an African, Abul Aswan. Okay, so I'm going to use the term Arabian type because the Arab could be black or white, just like the Jew could be black or white. And in fact, many of the original Jews were black. It's the later Jews who were white. So we have to be very careful what period we are dealing with. Okay, now it is very important to understand why the concern, why are we talking about Egypt? Why is it so important? Why does it always arouse such strong emotions? Nothing arouses stronger emotion in academic circles today than the discussion of Egypt. Even in my university, when I was introducing black civilizations as a course, and I included Egypt, history professors got up and said, Why are you putting Egypt in black civilization? It's not supposed to be there. It's in Africa, yes, but it is not African. And that's valid. The fact that it is in Africa doesn't make it African, because there are parts of Africa today that are not controlled by Africans. Okay, so that you have, the fact that it is in Africa itself doesn't make it African, because it's open to the Mediterranean, it's open to Asia, and the argument therefore was that since black people are inferior and cannot found civilization, those people who were on the borders invaded, came in and created the civilization and lifted the poor benighted black up into civilization. And that argument did not have any validity until the slave trade reached a certain point where the black was profoundly disadvantaged. He'd been excluded from everything, so that when they discovered that Egypt had had such a profound influence on European civilization, its science in particular, its philosophy, its all of its great concepts, the black could have nothing to do with it. Perhaps it's these people on the borders who came in and built this civilization. But when we go back to the Pyramid Age, and you will learn something tonight that is very astonishing, which I only became aware of, in fact, a few months ago, in connection with the Japanese trying to build the pyramid, that we are not dealing with inferior blacks. We are dealing with blacks at the very top of the world. And the reason why we are going back is for two main reasons. One, we who come out of a shattered world can be made whole again by bringing the pieces of our heritage together. And secondly, it is because we can establish on scientific grounds that man is not inferior or superior, that his equality is not built in any biblical fantasy or liberal sentiment. It is rooted in hard historical realities. What we have in evidence before us is an overwhelming body of things that establish that early Egyptian as African. Sheikh Antoniop, who appeared before the UNESCO conference in 1974, established after hours, presenting a vast body of evidence showing the intimate interconnections and threads to inner Africa, showing that everything Egyptian is African. Its language in particular, which had been classified as Afro-Asiatic, Afro-Hamitic, Afro-Semitic, Afro-this and that it was African. For the first time in 200 years, a world body agreed that they could not argue with that anymore. The evidence was overwhelming. The Egyptian language was established as an African language. Those elements that came in much later, the invaders, the interlopers who introduced certain Semitic and Asiatic elements, those things did not alter the fundamental structure of the language. They were just superficial elements that came in later. Diop showed that the totems were African. He showed that the culture was African. Many of their rituals and customs, their beliefs, their ideas were African. And he showed the traces. He could go back into the heartland, the birthplace. And as Gerald Massey had shown, the word Africa comes from Afroika, an Egyptian word meaning beginning. And do you know how it came to be Africa? When the Arabs invaded, it was changed to Ifriqiya, and then the Romans changed it to Africa. And so that is how we have Africa. Africa, in fact, is the only continent that ever named itself. Europe did not name itself. Europe comes from an African princess called Europa. America did not name itself. America was named by that Genoese, not the Genoese, adventurer, the friend of Christopher Columbus, Amerigo Vespucci. That's not the name of America. That's not the name of Europe. And Africa was given all sorts of names like Ethiopia, Libya, etc. Africa is the true name of Africa. The word for south, for example, the people of the south. south of Egypt.